Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, Muhiyuddin, for enlightening us. And I have one question. So, in regards to the point you said, the Byzantine developed because the one that came to spread Islam also because of the prophet,
Yes.
right? Because they have that tradition within them.
Yes.
But what about here in surrounding us, the tradition of we're having ashrams, teaching of Buddhism, Hinduism, Mahayana Buddhism,
Yes.
Sumatra, Kedah, and all that.
Yes.
So it's only proven that we already had that tradition in us
Yes.
among the Malay archipelago before Islam came.
Yes.
I'm not belittling what Islam has done for us,
Yes.
but I'm saying that it had already been with us.
Yes.
It's only natural that with Islam, then we develop more and more percentage, and it's easy for us to do so because of that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my point. What's your comment on that?
Well, excellent. Certainly. What we said just now, this part of the world, with the coming of Islam, there were already two major kingdoms. One is the Srivijaya, yes, and then the other is the Majapahit. And the Srivijaya and the Majapahit kingdoms, they represent, shall we say, a combination between Hinduism, Buddhism, as well as more autochthonous senses of belief. What is interesting, however, was that these major kingdoms of this part of the world also had achievements. I mean, we're not denying that they had achievements. For example, they translated a great number of works. They produced certain important literature, like I believe the Arjuna Vivaha, the Mahabharata. A number of texts were published. But something that is remarked by some of the scholars, in particular Professor Al-Attas, was that the Hindu-Buddhist superstructure was something maintained by the upper classes. Of course, this remains to be challenged. But he's saying that philosophic works were not translated, which is interesting, isn't it? That the higher writings amongst the Hindus were not translated into the Javanese, at least at the point of his writing in the 70s, at the point of his writing even in 2011, or maybe if there were other discoveries by now, I'm happy to be enlightened. So the existence of the ashrams, as well as some reported important historical events, I think some monks, were reported to come into this part of the world to spend time in the chandis, to spend time in the ashrams, as you said. But with regards to the coming of Islam, it is no longer now the province of the superstructure, nor is it something that is whereby the people from abroad came together, meaning to say for the sake of spiritual gathering or otherwise. With the coming of Islam, shall we say, the democratizing happened, because in where Islam is concerned, it eliminated the caste system. It made every individual significant, because the point of conversion would be throughout. The existence of the ashrams may have been the shall we say, the foundations through which the pasantrens would be built, but I highly doubt that it is a development from there. Meaning to say that, supposing these ashrams were already here, and supposing you had the chandis and so on, but we don't see any significant thinker in this part of the world. Yes? Were there any significant thinker who wrote on metaphysical, philosophical treatise? Unlike, for example, in Islam, when you had, by the 16th century, you had Hamzah Fansuri, Ar-Raniri, Shamsuddin, and furthermore, the treatises that were written in the language. Aesthetically, no doubt, the civilization of the Javanese and the Srivijayans produce many wonderful things, and nor do we deny the achievements, for example, in the technological aspects, like the building of crafts and ships and all these things. But as far as the coming of Islam into this part of the world, you see significance permeating. Also, and what I said just now about the thousands of islands there were in the archipelago, this took it by storm in that sense. Like you will see, pasantrans being established everywhere. Is it modeled after the ashrams? Possible. But then the pasantrans themselves, they were not insular, shall we say. They were connected to the larger Malay world. Let's just say another new sense of significations of this, the coming of Islam into this part of the world, was that whereas the ashrams and the various other architectural buildings left by the previous civilization connected the Malays, or connected those who live in this part of the world with India and shall we say, the greater part of India, where Hinduism is taken forth. What the coming of Islam did was to connect the Malays to Mecca and beyond. Because connecting with Mecca meant that you are now connected to a new world of discourse. Our scholars knew about Aristotle and Plato, knew about the ideas of the Greeks. They discussed being, they discussed the question of existence. They really thrived and soared in the abstract discussions as a result of the coming of Islam. Now, again, while saying all this, it is also possible that why they are capable of doing all that is because the soil was fertile to begin with. That perhaps they were already a very philosophical people, but these things all rely on a lot of guesswork and conjecture. Nevertheless, I still stand with the fact that the soil was fertile to begin with, which meant to say that the Malays, once they were exposed to the Quran and exposed to its teachings, they were able to arrive at the new conception of life, and this new conception of life produced a new group of people, a new civilization. Not necessarily, to such an extent that by the accounts of the 18th and the 19th centuries, when you read the works of Sheikh Abdul Samad Palembang or Daud bin Abdullah Al-Fatani and all these great scholars of the Malay world, you will see that their conception of the world no longer have any traces of the Hindu-Buddhist worldview. And when we say that it no longer has traces of the Hindu-Buddhist worldview, even if they were to occupy the same places like the ashrams, it is no longer understood as an ashram. It is understood as a pasantren, as a pondok. It is understood as a Muslim institution. Does that answer your question somehow?
Yeah, partly, but you also have among us Muslim Malay, for example, Malay philosophers that came up with national office still being discussed in Stanford University.
Yes.
So Pramana Tika by Lama Sherlingpa, or his name, Prince of Sawarna Bhumi or something.
Yes.
So yeah, he is the teacher of Atisa.
Yes.
The father of Zen Buddhism.
Yes.
He is a Malay. I'm not sure whether from Kedah or Sumatra.
Yes.
But he's a Malay. So I don't really know whether it has, whether the teaching of Buddhism at that time reaches everyone, but I would assume it is so because it is being taught in Malay.
Yes.
I Ching was recorded to spend, if I'm not mistaken, 7 months.
Yes.
He had to study language, to study the Malay first,
Yes.
before Buddhism.
Yes.
And then he was on his way to Nalanda University,
Yes.
in the north, somewhere in Bangladesh or now India.
Yes.
But some said he's in Kedah because he said he needs to use the port of Kedah to get to somewhere up north.
Yes.
Yeah, but not very much is known on that too, so we can only guess.
Yeah. Well, things like this, are bound to happen, I suppose, if discoveries of this like this sort are made about the individual philosopher, as you said, whose works are being studied in Stanford. Does it negate or deny the fact that with the coming of Islam, the new vision of reality happened? Does it negate that a significant change and alteration in the worldviews of the people did in fact happen? I mean, yes, supposing we look at the facts of human nature, human beings are by nature philosophical, but if they are served, mythological elements in their worldview, it may hinder the arrival at philosophic speculations. If they are presented constantly with just aesthetic images of things, yes, what we call the sensibilia, it may hinder them and render them unable to appreciate truths of a higher nature, which is intelligible. And furthermore, if we limit the human being only to this sensate existence, it would also render them and limit their capacity and potentiality to experience truths of a higher nature. Now, the existence of individual philosophers like that are, I suppose, interesting. I mean, I cannot deny that. But in the same way as, in Europe, the writings of the Icelandic and the Nordic sagas are still being read in some of the schools. But they know that to be mythological and they know that to be folkloric. In Britain, perhaps they may still study Cinewolf and Beowulf, but they don't treat, for example, Beowulf at the same status as they would treat Shakespeare. And overall, they don't regard the earlier writers of the mythological nature, like Beowulf, Cinewolf, and the Icelandic and Nordic sagas in the same ranks as a Plato and Aristotle. So similarly, I would like to see, I suppose, in the near future, a comparative philosophy, say, between Hamzah Fansuri and this man who was the teacher of Atisha. But even the likes of Toshihiko Izutsu, who published a very brilliant study comparing between Taoism and say, the metaphysics of Ibn Arabi, knew to place each thinker at their proper place in that sense. So, I mean, but whereas this singular figure, as you said, who was the teacher of Atisha, he had to study Malay and so on. First, the experts need to look at the manuscripts, if there are still any, and what was written in the manuscripts, and what was the language used, whether it is richly Sanskritic or richly Malay, one. And then, secondly, a comparative syntax and semantic analysis will need to be produced between the earlier scholar and the likes of a Raniri or a Fansuri. And then to see to what extent, for example, or rather in terms of modern Malay as it descended from Sumatra and Palembang, to which of these styles of writing and thinking is more congruent with our present day speaking. And once, if this, these initial propositions are met, then I would say, at least now, that I think we still deserve to look at our Muslim scholars in a positive light. That we cannot negate whatever they have produced, in particular with regards to our understanding of the world and being connected to world history, world philosophy, and preparing ourselves for the world to come. Whatever that lone thinker must have produced did not prepare the Malays who were there, or if they considered themselves Malay who were there, with this new abstract conception of Malayness to face, for example, the Brits, the Dutch, the Portuguese. In facing the Brits, the Dutch and Portuguese, and in particular in now the emergence of national consciousness, Islam still plays a dominant role, not the Hindu-Buddhist substratum, with the exception perhaps of some parts of Java.